Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. I wanted to make a video today about the autumnal books that I have been reading recently. So this is probably like September going into the halfway through October we are. I originally started out thinking that I was going to read a lot of spooky, scary books this season, but then nothing was actually either scaring me or holding my interest, and a lot of stuff that I read just wasn't very good. So I decided to take a slightly different turn and revisit some old favorites. So I am currently rereading a series of unfortunate events. This is the first time since I was a kid that I have read the entire series all the way through. Definitely done some rereads here and there over the years, and this is just the 13th book, but I am just starting the 12th book out of 13 now. These books actually hold up. I don't know if how many of you actually read these either as kids or as adults, but one of the things that I really loved about this series as a kid, and I still love as an adult, is that even though the protagonists are children, and this is a book that is primarily aimed at children, it doesn't shy away from the fact that children still live in the real world where there are dangers and problems and lots of unpleasant people out there that you will have to deal with. And the world is not necessarily kinder to you just because you are young. In fact, it can be even more arbitrary and unforgiving. If that sounds bleak, don't worry. This is also a very hilariously funny series. A lot of the jokes just make me chuckle. It's got a very wry and acerbic writing style that I really appreciate. I'm also realizing as I reread the whole series that I'm crediting this book series with my current and past love of solving puzzles and decoding things and basically conspiracy boarding my way through what's really going on in different fictional works. Really enjoying this reread. And I also picked up a couple books when I was on a road trip early in September at Malaprop's bookstore, which is a new to me bookstore in Asheville, North Carolina. So one of the books that I got there was Daniel Handler's, aka Lemony Snicket, and Then What Else? This is a book that is a collection of essays about basically whatever topic Daniel Handler is interested in writing on. So there have been essays about childhood experiences he's had, how he developed a weird love for the opera. There's an essay about how he fumbled his way into getting a literary agent as a young novelist. They're just about a bunch of very random things. It is a little bit like stream of consciousnessing your way through someone's mind. I've been reading this one pretty slowly for that reason. I like to actually sit and digest and internalize what I've read in the essay. I know that this book has gotten some criticism from people because they anticipated that it would be written in the character of Lemony Snicket, or the essays would touch a lot more on the process of writing a series of unfortunate events. This isn't really that. It's definitely still interesting and fascinating, but I think from my perspective, probably more so because I'm just interested in what people have to say about their lives. I don't know that I would have picked this up had I not read a series of unfortunate events, but having read a series of unfortunate events, this is not that. This is a very idiosyncratic essay collection, but I really am enjoying it. And as long as you know what you're in for, I think you would probably too. So also while I was at Malaprop, I picked up a Ray Bradbury book that I have not read, which is Something Wicked This Way Comes. This is a book that's beloved by a lot of people, including such greats as Stephen King and Margaret Atwood. And as somebody that has only ever previously read Fahrenheit 451, I wanted to see what it was all about. It's the story of two boys named Will and Jim and this creepy carnival that comes to their town. There's something a little bit off about the various people that work the carnival, and as they are drawn into the mystery of trying to figure that out, and also why everyone in the town is acting strangely since the carnival showed up, they really have to deal with some big questions of mortality and morality and what fear actually is. It's a very philosophical book, and it's not too long. Most of this back part of the book here is just critical essays and people's responses to it. So the book itself is is pretty short. I enjoyed it well enough. It's just that this book, I think, struggled as a novel because Bradbury's strength is really as more of a short story writer or a novella writer. So this is actually the longest work that he ever completed, and it kind of shows. There's a lot of really beautiful prose on a sentence by sentence level that really starts to overstay its welcome in many ways given the length of the book, because there are a lot of just beautiful sentences where nothing much happens and the characters are very lopsidedly developed. One of the boys is given a lot more character development than the other, even though it's hinted that they will both be this sort of intertwined destiny of their friendship that doesn't really wind up happening. And then the person who I think is really the protagonist of the novel is largely absent from many of the scenes. Like, his influence is kind of there, but you don't realize until later in the book that he's the protagonist. And I just think that this could have been developed better as a novel, but I also understand why it wasn't. The cool thing about this was that apparently Bradbury had this idea for the story like many years before it actually got published as a novel. And he wanted to turn it into a musical starring Gene Kelly. So he dedicated the book to Gene Kelly. That never wound up happening. There's apparently a movie from the 80s that I don't know if I'll ever wind up watching. And those of you who have read Cornelia Funke's The Thief Lord are probably going to recognize something that is a really big deal to the plot of this book. When I read that, I was sort of like, oh, come on, really? We're doing this thing again. But there we are. Undeterred, I decided I was going to pick up my second Bradbury Halloween book, which is The Halloween Tree. This one is specifically geared towards younger readers. That's published by Yearling, and they say it's for ages 9 to 12. Although similar to, I think, the concept of like A Christmas Carol, I think this is a good all ages book. You can probably get something out of it regardless of how old or young you are. And this, again, is a book where kind of not a lot happens. It's really a lot more of a picaresque about these kids whose friend goes missing on Halloween night. He is, if you've ever seen Hook, he's kind of the Rufio of the group. He's just the coolest. He's the most boyish boy. He has this swagger, this charm. He's the ringleader of them and all of their hijinks, and he goes missing when they're all supposed to go trick-or-treating on Halloween. And then they wind up meeting a mysterious person called Carapace Clavicle Mound Shroud, who takes them on a journey throughout space and time and different Halloween and death-oriented traditions from around the world to try and get their friend back. That's really all there is to it. That did kind of take a lot of the tension out of the plot for me because it's kind of foregone what's going to happen later in the end. But because the book was short enough, I think that it actually was stronger in some ways than Something Wicked This Way Comes. Although, if I struggled with some of the characterization in Something Wicked, the characters in here just, there's not much to them at all. Their names and their Halloween costumes, and except for Pipkin, who's the missing kid, that's about it. So, it was all right. It wasn't like earth-shattering or anything, but I can see why a lot of people enjoy this book. And both of these really just ignited my interest in reading more Bradbury because I think I could really enjoy that. What else have I been reading? I have a couple things that I have been reading and a book that a friend published. So I also picked up, when I was at Barnes & Noble the other day, and I'm going to share with you some of the books that I got there that I want to read this fall. I also kind of impulsively bought the magazine called Oh Reader. I had never heard of it before, but it's just a collection of essays about books and reading. They're pretty short. I want to say they're maybe like 500 word essays, just a 2-page, 2 columns a page spread. And they're just really kind of the perfect bite-sized thing to read, you know, like when I want to be in bed, but I want to replace scrolling on my phone with something that's like more meaningful and purposeful for me. And I don't always want to, you know, read the news as I'm trying to fall asleep. So this is kind of the best thing, the next best thing. There's also a photo essay in the back of one of these. Is it this one? There's a photo essay of people like reading with their pets, their dogs, their cats. Yeah. It's like right in the middle of it, which I find very endearing because I tend to read with my pets a lot too. Or I start reading and then they come and bother me and I'm like, okay, we're gonna get you a treat and then you're gonna calm down and let me finish my book. I also wanted to share a book that a friend of mine, Nicole Lindmuth, has published, and that's called This Book is Dangerous, a reading journal for those who don't want to be told what they can or can't read. She quoted me. I did an interview with her, I want to say like a year or two ago at this point, while she was working on writing the book, about my experiences as an educator in this climate of people wanting to ban books. You know, I could get very much into all of my feelings about this, but I think the the main thing that I want to share with this is that this book actually shares a lot of really actionable steps that you can take to fight book banning and censorship. And it is good to feel angry and fired up about these things because that inspires us to action. So I think for me, the real strength of this book is that it doesn't just let you sit in your negative feelings about book banning and censorship. It inspires you to take action. I have 2 Barnes & Noble books that I purchased, and then I have 1 comic book that I bought before I moved away from Seattle that I want to read before the spooky season times draw to a close. So let's start with the comic because this is, I think, the most overtly fall one or most overtly Halloween one, and that is Dracula. This is part of a Universal Monsters series. It's written by James Tynion IV and artwork by Martin Simmons. This is just like the rebirth of a very classic Universal Studios movie monster, and I'm very much a fan of classic old horror movies, even going back to the silent period. And I also know that I'm going to really enjoy this because I love James Tynion's writing, and also because Patton Oswalt says it's as gorgeous as a Guillermo del Toro film. So that's really what I need to know to entice me to read yet another Dracula retelling. Dracula is just such a good story. I mean, if you haven't read it, there are so many great adaptations of it out there. You don't even necessarily need to read it as a book, a textbook. There's a great podcast called R.E. Dracula because the whole thing is actually epistolary mostly. So most of the novel Dracula is people writing letters to each other, sending telegrams, and some people writing journal entries. So that really has meant that it lends itself very well to different types of adaptations. So there's Dracula Daily, which was the year that there was a Tumblr that was dedicated to posting whatever the excerpt was from Dracula dated for that day, and a bunch of people read it along and discovered the classic that way. There's R.E. Dracula, which is an audio drama in podcast form. It's fully voice acted for all of the different characters and sound effects and everything. And there's just so many good Dracula things. I'm trying to find when I open to a beautiful spread. I mean, look at this. This is the amazing splash page of the wolves from the story. What's not to love about that? I'm just completely enticed by this painting. It reminds me of a lot of the very dream sequency parts of the Sandman comics. Check this one out too. Just that red, those red eyes are so arresting. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And then my other 2 Barnes & Noble pickups. These are both actually, it's kind of funny, these are both hyped books that I'm partially picking up because of the hype and partially picking up because people said, hey, I think you would be interested in this. So one of them actually comes recommended from my dad, and that's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I have my cute little Halloween cookie bookmark that I put in here to show I'm reading it next. I did really not know a ton about this book. It came out a couple years ago and just recently won the Pulitzer Prize. And it wasn't until it won the prize that I actually read an excerpt of what it was about, and my dad sent me this. And it's apparently a retelling of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens in the American South. I'm very intrigued. I very much enjoyed the Charles Dickens book. I've read Kingsolver before, but I haven't read something that she's written in a while, and I figured that now that it's out in paperback, I would go ahead and pick it up. It was still kind of a pricey paperback. It was $22 new, but I did get this pretty like rainbowy cover that Barnes & Noble does, because apparently that's their thing now. They do like special edition covers of everything. Another special edition cover that I didn't intend to get, but I wound up getting because they had it, was Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I have not read any Sally Rooney books, as a matter of fact. I watched the Normal People television show and I really enjoyed it, even though I did think it was a little sad at times. Sad bordering on maudlin, I guess I should say. It's not that like bad things don't happen to people in their life. It was just that at some point I was like, okay, you can keep being mopey about your problems or you can do something about them, and they continued to mope. Anyways, this is, you know, kind of in the same milieu as the other Sally Rooney stories. They're about like people falling in love, their relationships. Intermezzo is apparently a reference to something in chess. I'm not really a big chess person. Like, I know how to play, but I'm a complete like beginner when it comes to that. I don't memorize openings. I don't know, you know, what are all the strategies and theories and stuff that go into it. But I know that it's going to be really, really well done. And I know I'm in good hands. And I do like this cover design. I'm intrigued at the idea of these chess pieces casting shadows that look just like people. I love it when the design gives you an insight into what the book is going to be about. So that's where I am right now for autumnal reads. It doesn't look very autumnal, but that's because all the trees behind me are my evergreen trees. But in the front yard, there's a ton more deciduous trees. They're like bright orange. And I think once I finish this, I'm gonna go curl up, make myself some tea, and do a little bit of reading. So, what are you interested in reading this fall? Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.